I still remember the summer I spent in rural Georgia, where the air was thick with the scent of magnolias and the whispers of the past. Growing up, my family would gather around the dinner table to share stories of our ancestors' exploits, but one tale always stood out: the legend of Southern Cannibal. As a child, I thought it was just an old wives' tale, a way to scare kids into behaving. But as I grew older, the stories began to seep into my dreams, and I started to wonder if there was truth to the whispers. It wasn't until I stumbled upon an ancient TV broadcast, recorded in 1955, that I realized the legend was more than just a myth. The grainy footage showed a figure, shrouded in shadows, with eyes that glowed like embers from the underworld. They called it Southern Cannibal, a creature said to roam the countryside, preying on unsuspecting victims. Some said it was a man, driven mad by the darkness of his own soul, while others claimed it was a spirit, born from the very land itself. I never believed any of it until that fateful night when I watched Southern Cannibal for myself. The broadcast had been airing on an old local channel, one that seemed to have been forgotten by time. It was as if the TV itself was trying to warn me away, but I couldn't tear my eyes from the screen. The figure loomed larger with each passing moment, its features still indistinct, but its presence suffocating. The air seemed to thicken, like a palpable mist that clung to my skin. I felt a shiver run down my spine as the camera zoomed in on the figure's face, if it could be called that. Its eyes burned with an otherworldly intensity, and for a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in their depths, something that looked almost human. But then, it was gone, leaving me staring at a void that seemed to stretch into infinity. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just glimpsed the face of madness itself. The broadcast ended abruptly, with no warning or explanation. It was as if the TV had been interrupted by some unseen force, one that didn't want me to see what lay beyond the screen's fragile barrier. And then, everything went black. When I came to, it was morning, and the sun was shining through my window like a cold, unforgiving eye. But something had changed within me. A spark of curiosity had been lit, one that threatened to consume me whole. I knew then that I had to dig deeper into the legend of Southern Cannibal, to uncover the truth behind the whispers and the darkness. Little did I know, I was about to embark on a journey from which there would be no return. I spent the next few days researching the legend of Southern Cannibal, scouring old books and dusty archives for any mention of the creature. The stories varied, but one theme remained constant. The cannibal was said to be born from the very earth itself, its body a twisted amalgamation of human and animal. Some claimed it had once been a farmer, driven mad by his own isolation and paranoia. Others whispered that it was a conjured spirit, created by a long-forgotten cult to serve as a sacrifice to some ancient deity. I found a 1920s article in the local newspaper, detailing a series of bizarre murders in which the victims were found with strange markings carved into their flesh, symbols that seemed to match the crude drawings made by the cannibalistic cultists in ancient texts. The article was written by a man named W.H. Jenkins, who claimed to have interviewed one of the surviving witnesses, an old woman named Granny Mayfield. According to Jenkins, Granny Mayfield had grown up hearing stories from her own grandmother about the cannibal's powers. She'd say it could make itself invisible in the blink of an eye, Jenkins wrote, and that its presence was like a cold wind on a summer's day. It'd freeze your blood and chill your bones. I couldn't help but wonder if Granny Mayfield had been telling the truth all along. Was Southern Cannibal a creature of legend or something more? And what lay behind those strange markings carved into the victim's flesh? I left the city behind, driven by a morbid curiosity to explore the rural landscape where Southern Cannibal was said to roam. My car wound its way through the rolling hills and fields of golden wheat, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. I felt like an outsider, a stranger in a land that seemed to be holding its breath in anticipation of something or someone. The few people I met along the way eyed me warily, their faces etched with suspicion and distrust. Some claimed to have seen strange lights flickering in the woods at night, while others whispered about hearing disembodied whispers on the wind. I laughed it off as small-town superstition, but a part of me wondered if there was truth to the tales. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the landscape, I pulled over to watch the stars come out. The sky was ablaze with color, a riot of pinks and oranges that seemed to pulse in time with my own racing heart. And then I saw it, a figure standing at the edge of the woods, watching me. My breath caught in my throat as I realized it was too still, too quiet. It wasn't just a person, it was something else entirely, something that didn't belong in this world. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I turned back to drive, but when I looked again, the figure was gone, or at least it seemed to be. The trees seemed to be watching me now, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out from the darkness. I knew then that I had stumbled into something much bigger than myself, something that would change my life forever. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease as I pulled into my rented cabin on the outskirts of town. The address was written in scribbled handwriting on a piece of paper, and I couldn't help but wonder if it had been written by someone who didn't want me there. As I stepped out of the car, a faint breeze rustled the leaves of the trees, making the branches seem to whisper my name. I shivered despite the warmth of the summer evening. The cabin was small and rustic, with a porch that creaked ominously in the wind. I had booked it online, promising myself a peaceful retreat from the city's chaos. But as I pushed open the creaking door, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The interior was dimly lit, with only a few flickering candles to light my way. I dropped my bags and began to unpack, trying to ignore the sense of disquiet that had settled over me like a shroud. As I worked, I heard a faint noise outside, the sound of footsteps crunching through the gravel beneath the porch. At first I thought it was just a stray animal, but then I heard it again, the soft thud of boots on wood, followed by an unmistakable pause. And then I saw it, a figure standing at the edge of the porch, watching me with eyes that seemed to bore into my soul. Its features were indistinct, shrouded in shadows that made it impossible to discern any defining characteristics. It was as if it had stepped out of the darkness itself, and I felt like I was drowning in its presence. I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat as the figure took a step closer. Its eyes seemed to be drawing me in like a moth to a flame, and then just as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished. The footsteps ceased, and the silence that followed was oppressive, heavy with unspoken menace. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but the feeling of being watched lingered. Every creak of the cabin's wooden floorboards made me jump. Every rustle of leaves outside seemed like a warning sign. I attempted to distract myself with books and movies, but even the mundane routines of daily life felt suffocating in this isolation. The nightmares began soon after, fragments of images seared into my mind, twisted faces, grasping hands, and an endless expanse of dark woods that seemed to swallow me whole. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart racing as if I'd just outrun a terror beyond comprehension. Still, the presence persisted, its unsettling aura seeping into every waking moment. One night I swore I saw it again standing in the corner of the cabin, watching me with an unblinking gaze that sent shivers down my spine. This time, however, there was something different about its demeanor, a hint of curiosity perhaps, or even a flicker of recognition. It beckoned to me, its hand outstretched as if inviting me into some unspeakable realm. I tried to scream, but my voice was frozen in my throat. The next morning, I discovered the first message scrawled on the cabin's wall, a single word, scrawled in handwriting that seemed to match no human script. Wait. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized I was not alone in this place, and whatever it was waiting for, it would be coming for me soon enough. I woke up to the sound of twigs snapping outside my window. At first, I thought it was just a stray animal, but then I heard the unmistakable crunch of bone being chewed. My heart skipped a beat as I threw off the covers and rushed to the window, pulling back the curtains to reveal nothing out of the ordinary. But then, I saw it, a figure standing in the distance, its back to me as it watched something on the ground. The sound of chewing grew louder and my stomach churned with a mix of fear and fascination. I tried to step back, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. The figure slowly turned towards me, its head cocked to one side as if sensing my presence. I gasped as our eyes met, and for a moment, time stood still. Its gaze was like a cold wind, cutting through me with an unspeakable hunger. I tried to look away, but my eyes were trapped, unable to break the spell. The figure took a step closer, its movements deliberate and menacing. I could feel its hot breath on my skin, making my pores sweat in terror. And then it spoke, a low, raspy voice that sent shivers down my spine. "You're next," it growled, its words dripping with an unspeakable hunger. I tried to run, but my legs were frozen in place. The figure took another step closer, its eyes burning with an unholy intensity. I was trapped, and I knew it. I tried to scream, but my voice was trapped in my throat. The figure loomed over me, its eyes blazing with an otherworldly hunger. I felt myself being pulled down into a dark vortex, unable to move or escape. My body was paralyzed, frozen in terror as the figure leaned in closer and closer. I could feel its hot breath on my skin, making my pores sweat in fear. And then everything went black. When I came to, I was lying in bed, gasping for air. The room was silent, the only sound the soft hum of the nightlight. But as I lay there trying to catch my breath, I knew that something was wrong. My body felt heavy, weighed down by an unseen force. I tried to move, but my limbs were like lead weights. And then I saw it, the figure standing in the corner of the room, watching me with an unblinking gaze. Its eyes seemed to bore into my soul, making me feel like I was drowning in a sea of darkness. I tried to scream again, but my voice was gone. The figure took a step closer, its movements slow and deliberate. I felt myself being pulled back down into the dark vortex, unable to escape. And then everything went black once more. When I came to, it was morning. The sun was shining through the window, casting a warm glow over the room. But as I lay there trying to process what had happened, I knew that something was very wrong. My body felt heavy, weighed down by an unseen force. And then I saw it, a message scrawled on the wall in red ink. "I'll always be with you." The world around me began to distort and warp, like a reflection in rippling water. The figure's presence seemed to be seeping into my mind, infecting my thoughts with its dark energy. I tried to focus on the mundane tasks of daily life, but even simple actions became Herculean efforts. Brushing my teeth felt like climbing a mountain, and washing my face was a struggle against an unseen foe. The words, "I'll always be with you," echoed in my mind, taunting me with their cruel intent. I began to question my own sanity, wondering if I was truly seeing this entity or just a product of my fevered imagination. But the more I tried to push it away, the more it seemed to seep into my pores. I started to experience strange visions, shadowy figures lurking in the corners of my vision, and whispers that only I could hear. The lines between reality and madness began to blur, and I found myself questioning what was real and what was just a product of my own paranoia. One day, I woke up to find that my room had changed. The furniture was arranged differently, and the window now looked out onto a landscape that seemed to shift and writhe like a living thing. I stumbled through the day, trying to make sense of this new reality. But every door I opened led only to more questions, and every answer seemed to raise more queries. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of confusion, with no lifeline in sight. And then I saw it, my own reflection staring back at me from the mirror. Its eyes were black as coal, and its skin was stretched taut over its skull. It smiled, and I knew that I was truly gone. I stumbled upon an old journal hidden away in the cabin's attic. The pages were yellowed and cracked, but as I flipped through them, I noticed that the handwriting changed. One entry was written in a language I couldn't understand, while others seemed to be in code. But one message stood out: "They're waiting for you," scrawled in bold letters across the page. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I read the words. Who was waiting for me? And what did they want from me? I tried to focus on the tasks at hand, but my mind kept wandering back to the journal. The next day, I found another message. "The truth is in the shadows," scrawled on a piece of paper hidden under the bed. What did it mean? Was I supposed to look for something specific? I felt like I was being led on a wild goose chase, with no clear destination in sight. But as I continued to read through the journal, I started to notice a pattern. Each message seemed to be pointing to a larger truth, that there was something sinister lurking just beneath the surface of this cabin and its occupants. The words were cryptic, but they seemed to be hinting at a deeper conspiracy. And then I found it, a small key hidden in the pages of one of the journal entries. It fit perfectly into a small lock on the wall, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, I found a note that made my blood run cold. "You're not who you think you are." Who was I, really? And what did this message mean? As I delved deeper into the cabin, I stumbled upon a room that seemed frozen in time. The air was thick with dust, and cobwebs hung from the ceiling like macabre tapestries. But it was what lay on the floor that made my blood run cold. A series of journals, each one belonging to a different occupant of the cabin. As I flipped through the pages, I discovered a dark history, a history of ritualistic sacrifices, of human experimentation, and of unspeakable horrors that lurked in the shadows. The further I read, the more I realized that I was not alone in the cabin. There were others trapped in this place for decades, their sanity slowly unraveling like threads from a frayed rope. And then I found it, a photograph of myself, taken on a day I had no memory of. The image showed me standing beside a figure, its face obscured by shadows. But it was the caption that made my heart stop. Subject 17, Successful Integration. Who was this figure? And what did they mean by integration? As I continued to explore, I uncovered more disturbing secrets. A laboratory hidden beneath the cabin, where twisted experiments had been conducted on unwitting subjects, and a series of cryptic symbols etched into the walls, pulsing with an otherworldly energy. It was as if I had stumbled into a nightmare world, one that was both familiar and yet completely alien. And then I heard it, the sound of footsteps, echoing through the corridors like a death knell. I knew I was not alone in the cabin, and that I had to get out before it was too late. As I stood frozen in terror, the footsteps grew louder and closer. Suddenly, the door to the laboratory burst open, and a figure emerged from the shadows. It was an old man with sunken eyes and skin like parchment. He regarded me with a cold, calculating gaze, as if sizing me up for some unknown purpose. "You're Subject 17, he said, his voice dripping with malice, "and you're about to discover the truth." He gestured to a chair in front of him, and I stumbled towards it, my legs shaking beneath me. The old man began to speak, his words pouring out like a dark confession. "This cabin has been a place of darkness for centuries," he said. "A place where the veil between worlds is thin." He leaned forward, his eyes glinting with malevolence. "We're not just cannibals, Subject 17. We're gatekeepers. We open the gates to the other side, and we feed on the flesh of those who dare to enter." As he spoke, the room began to spin around me like a carnival ride gone wild. I felt my mind reeling, struggling to comprehend the horror that was being revealed to me. The old man's eyes seemed to bore into my soul, as if searching for something hidden deep within. "And you, Subject 17, he said finally, his voice dripping with contempt. "You're a product of our experiments, a failed experiment perhaps, but one that holds the key to unlocking the secrets of the other side." As he spoke, the world around me began to dissolve into chaos. The shadows seemed to coalesce into something tangible, like a living thing. I felt myself being drawn towards it, like a moth to flame. And then everything went black. I slowly came to, my head throbbing with pain. The old man was standing over me, his eyes gleaming with an otherworldly intensity. "Welcome back, Subject 17, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. I tried to speak, but my voice was barely a whisper. The old man smiled, his lips curling up in a grotesque grin. "You're just in time for the main course." He gestured to a figure tied to a chair in the corner of the room. It was one of the other occupants of the cabin, their eyes wild with fear. The old man began to chant, his words weaving a spell of darkness and despair. I felt my mind begin to unravel like threads pulled from a tapestry. But then, something inside me snapped. I lunged at the old man, my fists flying in a wild punch. He laughed, his eyes flashing with amusement. "You're too late, Subject 17, he said. "The ritual has already begun." As he spoke, the room began to fill with an otherworldly energy. The air was thick with an electric charge, like a storm about to break. I felt myself being lifted off the ground, my feet dangling in midair. The old man reached out, his hand closing around mine like a vice. "Join us," he said, his voice echoing in my mind. "Join us and become one of us." I tried to struggle, but it was no use. The energy surged through me like a tidal wave crashing against the shore, and then everything went black.